I share screen because she'll need to give the permission to it. Oh, Amy Yang is going to be doing the slides.
So can you do that? Give Amy permission to share?
I think I can already share. I see the button available to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that is that accurate, Patricia? She doesn't need permission.
Well, I just gave her co-host, so she really should be able to.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we start? I'm going to let Francesca introduce this and go for it. And we have 25 minutes for you guys to do this. I don't know how if you need that much time, but we have that. So go ahead, Francesca.
Including questions. Yes, I've been attending the webinars and been following the missing middle housing and all the zoning changes, as some of you know, for over 5 years now, including state housing bills. But anyway, I've asked a lot of questions that Faye and different ones have emailed me answers back, but it got clarified also as in future webinars. There's a lot of detail here, so these guys are going to give an overview, but if you really are interested in detail, there are slides from each one of the presentations if you don't want to sit and watch them that will pretty much tell you what they presented at each one of the 4 webinars. So we have Amy Yang, and she's going to do the slides, and we have Faye Mangum, and we have Remy Mendoza, and they are all with the planning department for the city.
Great. Thanks for the awesome introduction, Francesca. And I think you teed it up perfectly. And it's exactly it. Today we'll be providing an overview for a detailed presentations. Highly recommend checking out the webinars. We've got an hour of each of those topics, so just a lot to dig into there. And for the sake of time, we're going to keep it high level. Obviously, very happy to answer any questions you guys might have today. Yeah, and as Francesca said, I'm Amy Yang. I'm a city planner with the City of Sacramento. My team is working on the zoning code update. I'm joined today by Faye Mingham, Associate Planner, and Remy Mendoza, Long Range Planning Manager. And so we'll all be available for questions at the end. And without further ado, let me get my screens set up. My settings. Sorry, I know other people are much more adept at this. I'm almost there. All right, guys, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so we're going to start by talking a little bit about the background, talk about why we're doing this project in the first place. We'll talk about our schedule and scope, cover key project components, and then talk about ways to share feedback. 2 years ago, in February of 2024, City Council adopted a long-range policy document we call the General Plan. The General Plan is really this big overarching umbrella document that guides development in the city. And the pyramid shows that the general plan really sits at the top of all other planning documents in the city. It's really meant to be implemented by other more detailed planning efforts like master plans, strategic plans, and also the zoning code. And so that's what we're here to do. The 2040 general plan set really broad visionary policies, and now through the zoning code update, we're putting standards to those policies. So over the last 2 years, staff have been doing a lot of analysis, trying to make sure that what we are proposing and bringing forward makes sense. And at least from a city staff implementation perspective. This summer, we've been doing a lot of outreach, doing a lot of presentations like this to neighborhood associations, community associations across the city, as well as other local organizations, professional and advocacy groups. We've been going to pop-up events at citywide events all summer long. We have a few more scheduled. We're going to the Banana Festival this Saturday. Faye's going to be there, so go say hi to her. But after outreach ends on August 31st, we'll be preparing our ordinance, and then we're heading into our adoption hearings starting in October and hopefully ending with City Council adoption in December. So our scope can be broken up into roughly 7 components. We're working on simplifying residential zoning, expanding neighborhood commercial uses, updating missing middle housing standards. Our standards will also focus growth near transit, update auto-oriented use standards. We're also making changes to streamline the code as well as rezoning properties for consistency citywide. So why are we simplifying the residential zones? The 2040 general plan made a big change in terms of the land use designations. So the 2035, its general plan, its predecessor, had around 9 land use designations. In the 2040 general plan, we consolidated that to just 2. So to follow along with that pattern in an effort to simplify the use of these policy documents in residential development, we also are proposing to simplify our residential zoning districts. So we currently have in our existing code 13 districts. We are proposing to simplify and consolidate them into 4. So N stands for neighborhood, which should align with this idea of having a neighborhood land use designation. So N1, neighborhood 1. This is where our lower intensity residential zones will go. This is where the missing middle housing standards will go. It's also where we'll be introducing the opportunity for more neighborhood commercial uses. N2, slightly more intense than N1. It's really meant to transition from missing middle housing types to the larger apartment types. This will also see the introduction of more allowed neighborhood commercial uses. N3 is like your standard apartment complexes, higher intensity residential. These zones had already included a broad range of neighborhood commercial uses, so that part's not changing. And then finally, we've got our RMX zone, our residential mixed use zone. This really allows a mix of residential commercial uses, think like ground floor retail with units above. So with this consolidation, it means that we'll also have to rezone a lot of properties, especially the residential properties, like think R1, R2, R3, etc. Right? Yes, Patricia.
Well, sorry, I'm just curious if I'm just curious that all the zonings contain commercial when the hope is to have housing and missing middle.
Right.
So why mix commercial in?
That's a really good question. In addition to increasing housing, we also want to create walkable communities where folks have access to all their basic needs and services and amenities, right? So the thinking is that with introducing the possibility of having neighborhood commercial uses locate within neighborhoods and residential communities, that we'll see more smaller scale businesses serve local communities as opposed to needing to drive across town for something. You can walk down the street for that. So obviously there's a balance. Oh, go ahead.
I kind of get that, but I mean, it sounds appealing on one level, but how do you control where it is? I mean, how about a corridor? I mean, rather than mixing it in the neighborhood. I mean, I'm just concerned about where you're going to put the commercial.
And I just want to piggyback on that since you're doing that. The reality is what's happened, and sometimes I feel like the city planners and the city council maybe are out to lunch. The city mandated all this ground floor retail and it sits vacant because there's no parking. The other thing, if you look at what's happened, is that grocery stores in neighborhoods like Midtown, there was one in East Sac, they have closed. Now, why have they closed? Because people want to shop, either they're doing Amazon or they want to shop at, at Costco. So in a way, this plan, it's kind of a mismatch. This isn't Europe where people do go to the corner store all the time. The corner stores are extremely expensive. And so you've actually seen, it's almost like this plan is out of step with reality.
Yeah, those are really good points. I'm going to skip ahead a few slides
Sorry,
kind of to
Patricia.
oh, I'm sorry. Was someone saying something?
I just said I interrupted Patricia, so.
Oh, Patricia, did you want to add on something?
No, no.
Okay. Okay,
Oh,
cool.
sorry. Go ahead.
Um,
Sorry.
So I'm going to give you guys a sneak peek of our slides for neighborhood commercial. More, so I also want to emphasize that this is not a mandate to like inject commercial, right? This is just the option. So if a small business owner wanted to open like a nail salon, like they had like their side gig or something, they wanted to open up for business in their garage, for example, like they could do that under this provision. Um, so we are limiting it to corner lots. So it's not like going to saturate entire neighborhoods. And again, this is only if the property owner wants to. This is not a mandate to. It's not like we have to meet a certain quota. So in many cases, we probably won't see any changes, right? And in some cases too, we might see businesses locate within existing homes. Of course, there will be instances where someone just wants to create straight up commercial use, like a small cafe or something.
So
Just
basically, what you're saying though is the neighborhood doesn't have any input. I mean, you already have a provision for home businesses, and one of the
mm,
issues, particularly in our neighborhood, is there's
mm,
no parking. So
yeah.
that's one of the reasons probably why there is no retail at the bottom of
Mm,
the Geo building. But I feel
mhm.
like this is somebody's idea that doesn't match reality.
That's a really great point, right? And like the purpose of this outreach effort is to hear from folks like you to get a reality check, right, on whether or not these proposals will work or not. So I would really encourage folks from this community association to come out to our meeting tomorrow, provide input online, right? Because these are the things that Planning Design Commission and Council will want to hear. And we are hearing a lot of support for this, right? So if you guys are feeling like this is not a reasonable thing to consider, that is an equally important voice to provide and to share out. Remy, did you want to add something?
Yes, I do want to be respectful of the time that's been allocated to us. And I think Amy does have a thorough presentation to run through to cover some key changes that are really important. And she's going to provide a nice explanation and context on the proposal. Would it be possible to hold questions to the end of her presentation just to make sure that we could get through everything? And then we'll allocate plenty of time to answer those questions.
Um, we could do that, but I mean, I think it's also useful if people do have questions. But go ahead.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. Yeah. Whatever is helpful for folks, here for it. Um, all right. Want to make sure that we don't have any additional questions on neighborhood commercial before I jump back to rezoning. And we can always circle back because there's more to talk about with neighborhood commercial. All right, hearing none, I am going to jump back into rezoning. So with the residential zone consolidation, we're going to see a lot of rezones, right? Because we have to rezone our residentially zoned parcels into neighborhood zone parcels. So that's going to be one type of rezone. Another type of rezone is more technical, where we're also trying to clean up our zones a little bit in terms of some suffixes that are still tagged at the end of some zone districts. For example, dash R or dash FF. At this point, they don't mean anything anymore. They meant something at one point. Those regulations went away. For some reason, the suffix has stayed, but now is our opportunity to clean that up a little bit so it's easier to understand. And finally, we've got a type of reason that I think most folks would be interested in. So we took a look at potentially inconsistent or parcels that were potentially inconsistent between their general plan designation and their zone, and looked at them individually to see if, is this actually appropriate for rezone? So we looked very carefully at context, existing use, their development standards, right? Does this make sense? So we have developed an interactive rezone map that's available on our website. Highly recommend everyone take a look at it. If there's a piece of property that you're especially interested in, take a look and make sure that if we are proposing any rezones, that it makes sense to you. And there's a way to provide comment directly on the map. So if you want to say something about our proposed rezone, that's a really great place to do it. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about missing middle housing and what we're doing with those standards. As a refresher, missing middle housing really just refers to buildings that look like homes on the outside, like a single family home on the outside, but might actually include multiple units on the inside, like 2, 3, or 4. And so a little bit of context is that we adopted an interim ordinance in the fall of 2024. And in that time, we've taken a look at lessons learned, what's worked, what's not worked. And the intention was always to codify these or make them permanent in our existing zoning code. So that's what we're doing right now. As we open up our zoning code for updates and revision, we're also looking at, okay, how can we improve our missing middle housing standards as we put it into our code for real. So one key component to understand the standards that we're proposing is the use of floor area ratio. So floor area ratio is really just a way to talk about how big buildings can be. It's also how we regulate how big buildings can be. It can be calculated very generally by dividing building area by lot area. However, I find it most easy to just think about it in terms of the bigger the FAR, the bigger the building. And this is important to know because our FAR, our missing middle housing standards will differ between FAR1 and FAR2 areas. So this is a map of Elmhurst. As you can see, it is mostly FAR2 with some FAR1, and this is mainly due to its proximity to the blue line. Also for reference, this is the zoning, the current zoning in Elmhurst. It's mainly R1, and if you remember the table from a few slides ago, R1 is going to become N1. And also on that table, we talked about how N1 zones will now have the missing middle housing standards. So all that to say is that Elmhurst will still be impacted by our missing middle housing standards.
I just want to ask, what is being done to protect trees? If you allow missing middle housing, you increase hardscaping. How do trees factor into this?
Absolutely. That's a really great question. So our proposed standards do include provisions for trees. Now we're still working with our sustainability team and city arborists to make sure that the space allocated for trees is actually viable. Like it can actually hold a big tree, right? Like it makes no sense to set aside space for a tree when it can't really support a tree. And so we're still in the midst of figuring out what that sweet spot is, because housing, of course, is a really big priority, and also heat mitigation and sustainability. These are all huge priorities for the city. So we're working with multiple folks and other departments to figure out a good balance for that. But that is a very big consideration of ours. We do briefly touch on that in our missing middle housing webinar. So I would highly recommend checking that out if you're interested in hearing more about it.
So what's the priority there, though? Is the priority to get densification, or is the priority to protect trees?
The priority is to find a balance between the two.
Which means that this thing would allow tree loss then.
Not necessarily. There are standards for tree retention as well. I mean, which was also in the interim ordinance. So we are truly trying to find a balance, right? And so, and again, I will emphasize the importance of having community voice out at our public hearings, right? I think it's really important for Planning and Design Commission as well as City Council to hear the concerns of the community as these proposals are getting pushed forward. We've got a lot of advocates pushing for this. And that if that's all council is hearing, then that's the way staff is going to get pushed. So totally hear you. And these are valid concerns. And I would highly encourage you guys to really get involved in the process, provide comment. We'll be sharing those comments out. But yeah, it's a tough conversation to have, and it's a tough balance to strike. All right, so one of the biggest questions we're asking around missing middle housing is how comfortable are we with buildings that are 35 feet or 45 feet in our neighborhoods? Now, in Elmhurst, it's mostly FAR2. So I'm going to talk mostly about FAR2 standards. In areas of FAR2, we're proposing to allow 45 feet straight up. We are also proposing to remove the tent, the what is it called? The bolt control tent. We are introducing other massing requirements to make it fit a little bit better in the community. We do understand that 45 feet is a drastic change from existing neighborhoods. So we really highly recommend folks to take our survey. It's also on our webpage. This is a data point that City Council is especially interested in. So earlier this year, we took this item to council. They're like, yeah, 45 feet. That sounds great. But they're like, but double check with the community, right? Like, because we know like folks have had concerns before. So we really want to make sure that we're making the right decision. So highly recommend folks go online, take the survey, let us know what you think. We'll be sharing out the data with City Council. But just want to let you know this is what the proposals are right now so that folks can make an informed decision.
I have my hand raised on this because my biggest problem is I don't go to city council meetings, but I often submit e-comments and they're often long and detailed. But then these people get up and they're all like with their sob story or whatever, or why they want this to pass. Is that all people are listening to, or do they really read those e-comments? Because a lot of people comment, they don't just necessarily show up there. I don't drive, for example.
Yeah, I would say that the e-comments are certainly a part of the public record, but in-person testimony is also very powerful. So both are considered by council.
I will say that we've got this new online viewing platform that the city just rolled out like 2 weeks ago, maybe. And I think it allows for much better online participation, including commenting. So highly recommend checking that out. If you guys get our e-blast, there's a link to that, like the webpage where you can find a link to register to attend online. But check that out because like Remy said, live testimony is very powerful. All right, back to
question.
Yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
With those standards for the housing standards, are there provisions for setbacks so that buildings don't necessarily go straight up for 45?
Yes, there are setbacks, and there are also transitional height requirements, but only for areas next to FER1. So for Elmhurst, that wouldn't necessarily apply. I think there's only like a few parcels in Elmhurst that have an FAR of 1. Most of Elmhurst is an FAR of 2. So those transitional heights might not necessarily apply. But yeah, we do have setback requirements. Yeah.
In Elmhurst, what this would mean is tearing down existing housing. Is there any analysis here looking at the environmental impacts of doing that? I mean, if you did this kind of thing in Elmhurst, you would be tearing down existing buildings.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective. We don't expect folks to be tearing buildings down, especially homes that they've lived in for, generations. But yeah, like,
Yeah,
again,
the general plan, yeah, I'll say that the general plan did evaluate the anticipated growth for the city of Sacramento, and we do anticipate to accommodate 69,000 units within our infill footprint. But I think as neighborhoods grow and families are looking for maybe more space or opportunities to invest, it is possible that you're going to see redevelopment of sites that are going to include larger and taller buildings and room for growth in existing neighborhoods. So we do anticipate that over time the neighborhood scale is going to change as you see taller buildings.
So you're basically eliminating single family neighborhoods through this. And yet there are large vacant lots in many parts of the city, including on Stockton Boulevard. So why is the city focusing on destroying single family neighborhoods instead of developing, vacant parcels?
So the single family units are still allowed. They're not something that are prohibited. It creates a range of uses that are allowed, whether it's a single unit or a sixplex or an eightplex, depending on market concerns. And both existing neighborhoods and vacant lots could see some of this growth over time.
Great. And like, that's not to say like Stockton's getting the same treatment. It just happens to have some more vacant parcels. So yeah, and I think it depends on the developer on what they're willing to invest in, whether they want to buy out somebody in an established neighborhood or if they want to go with an easy development on Stockton.
So
Yeah.
basically, this is about favoring developers and not, again, it's really a anti-single family neighborhood proposal. That's what it is.
I think
Just
it's
don't
like
call it
Remy
that,
said, we're hoping to create more opportunities for folks to live in Sacramento.
And it is a trade-off, right? Whether you want to keep the existing character of the neighborhood and just incrementally add more housing, or whether you want a transformational type of approach as well. And so this is just a draft proposal. It hasn't been finalized. We are hoping to finalize it this year. And so if you have any comments or feedback or input, it would be important. And this is the opportunity to share that input before the framework is finalized.
Why don't you put those links in the chat, or are you gonna, because we should share those, Francesca.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, I think you're on mute, Francesca. Yeah.
It's all on one web page.
Yeah, I can absolutely type it in right now. Or Faye,
Well,
if you can.
Francesca's got it. We can
Gotcha.
email it and add it to the homepage.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it would be a big scramble for people to try to show up at the planning commission tomorrow. I mean, this
for
is,
sure. Understood.
but hopefully there's going to be more meetings that people can go to.
Absolutely. Faye has put in the project website in the chat for folks that want to take a look at it now. Also, yeah, happy to provide what other resources necessary to help with this.
Does Sacramento have a demolition delay ordinance for historic buildings?
I am not familiar with that. We can double check with our historic preservation team. It was not something that we looked at, and if it is something that the city does, we're not proposing any changes to it.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. We do have some protections for many protections for historic properties, and so we're not looking to touch any of those protections. They're going to continue to exist. Yeah.
Those have to be, though, actually designated as historic areas. Like there are areas in Midtown that are.
Correct.
At this point,
Yeah.
Elmhurst is not.
There wouldn't be any just for any building over 100 years old, for example.
No, it actually has to go through a process.
Designation. Okay.
Yeah, and looks like Faye has also added a link to the Planning and Design Commission for tomorrow, which also includes a link to attend online. So if folks have the time to kind of put it on their computer tomorrow, that would be a great place to find it. Oh, thank you, Andrew, for adding the link to the Missing Middle Housing Survey.
Oh yeah, I was just going to mention that I was telling the tree group in our neighborhood that it's important for people to comment on that, because however they feel about any of the others, there was a question on there about concern about development in trees.
But you said all of this is on one page, right? Or do we have to have these separate links? And the one
it is.
and
Andrew just provided a direct link to it, but it is all on one page. Yeah.
Sorry, so that page, is that the zoning code update page?
Yeah, actually it might be helpful if I just like give you guys a quick tour of it. I have it pulled up. It'd be really easy for me to share. Let's see.
But that's the one you put, I don't see it now in the chat, but it's zoning code update. That's the page that has all the stuff on it.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Hold on, give me 1 second. All right, so when you go to cityofsacramento.gov/zoning code update, you should see this screen on the top. It'll say 2040 general plan and zoning consistency. We have a little about section. And then we go into our scope. Yeah, this will be an important place to provide feedback. I can show that right now. Open in a new link. Okay, so this is what we're calling our informational boards, right? Our landing page for a bunch of stations where we're providing information and for folks to provide comments. So this is station 1, just a very broad overview. You can read through these informational boards. You can see what other people have written here. You can also add your own comments. And there are multiple stations. So we've got a station on just the overview. We've got one on missing middle housing. We've got the missing middle housing survey linked here. It's also on our main project page. I can show you that in a second. It's just linked in multiple places for convenience. A station on neighborhood commercial, one on rezoning. We've got our interactive rezone map linked here, also linked on our main page, but again, linked in multiple places for convenience. We've also got just a page on general, like other smaller technical changes, but still a part of our update. And one of those is removing planned unit developments, like ones that have been built out or with expired development agreements. So really they're not in play anymore. It's a cleanup item mostly, but this map is out here just for folks to take a look at and to make sure we haven't missed anything. All right, so I'm going to go back to the main project page. All right, so that was this main provide feedback button. Underneath that, we've got a survey section. And again, you can access this in multiple ways. This takes you to a landing page, mainly because it gives you a high-level overview of what the survey is about, what it's asking, and we also provide this in 6 different languages. So when you open the survey, it takes about 5 minutes. It'll ask some basic demographic information. It'll ask you about like what kind of home you live in, about the neighborhood you live in, and also what kind of neighborhood you would want to live in. So those are the basic questions. Hopefully, I think it only takes about 5 minutes. So if you only have 5 minutes to spend, I would recommend spending it here on this survey. All right, we also have our interactive rezone map right here, again, linked in multiple places. But yeah, so here it's a little bit lengthy at the top. Apologize for that, but it's real. I promise it's really helpful in helping to navigate the map itself. So we think this is pretty cool. On the left side, we have our existing zoning. On our right side, we have our proposed zoning, and there's a slider here in the middle, and you can see how it changes. And before I go any further, I want to point you guys to a couple of guidance documents and additional resources that will really help understand what's going on here because there are multiple layers. First up here is a link to our land use and placemaking element from the general plan, which was adopted 2 years ago. But this is important because this document establishes the maximum FARs, which as this conversation has shown is important in terms of how our standards are developed. The second bullet here takes you to our existing zoning code. So if you want to look at existing zones, existing standards, existing allowed use, just to compare it with our new ones, this is where you would go. Bullet 3 is a guide to proposed permitted uses. So especially in terms of like the consolidated residential zones, you might be wondering, okay, well, what does that mean specifically in terms of what I can and cannot have? This is a really good place to look. And then finally, we have a map legend guide and rezone methodology. And the reason this is important because there's several layers to our rezone map. So I'm going to open the legend, which is on the left side. See this like stacked square symbol? So you'll start to see that we've got multiple layers. We've got new zoned, old zone, got multiple general plan layers here. And then the legend also includes the rezones broken down into consolidate to new zone, which reflects the consolidation of residential to neighborhood zones. So all of that is going to have like a green boundary around it. The rezone is what I talked about earlier in terms of, we're looking at consistency between designation and zone. So here we've outlined those in red for folks to identify easily. We also have some technical changes, which I talked about in terms of, like cleaning up the suffixes, like where there are -R, -FF, like those don't mean anything anymore. So we're just cleaning those up.
I'm just going to interrupt you. I think what's key here is the impact on the neighborhood and how people can make comments.
Yes.
I mean, this is getting a lot into the weeds here. So, and I know we're a little bit over time because you've answered questions. So maybe you could just kind of focus on that as you.
I'm just sort of curious. Can you slide that over the neighborhood again? That little thing you did over, just what the neighborhood would look like.
So this is around. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's like pretty alarming, actually.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I will say the screen that you're seeing, that's the neighborhood consolidation, right? Remember we talked about the R zones going to the N zones. That's happening citywide, right? That simplification of zone districts, that is happening citywide.
No, and I appreciate that. I didn't think we were singled out by any means. This is we are part of the city. I'm going to ask a really elementary, maybe embarrassing question. When we talk about missing middle housing, are we talking about that we don't have enough housing? I see a lot of housing happening, and so I see a lot happening. Are we talking about missing middle? Is that affordability, which is a which is an issue of itself? Are we talking about not enough housing? Are we talking about housing that is near where people's jobs are, which, what is exactly missing middle housing, and why? I mean, I appreciate it on a sort of level, but I'm also sensitive to the destruction of neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe I can just focus here a little bit on kind of the word missing middle. The idea is that at the end of a spectrum, you have a one end single unit, and at the other end, you have larger apartments. And in the middle, you have a product type that you haven't really seen a lot of development over the last 50 years, and that's duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, sixplexes, eightplexes, 12plexes. So the plexes, if you think of it that way, or small neighborhood scale apartments. You do see larger apartments. Developers certainly know how to develop those and single units, but you don't see this middle type of housing product. So it does not tie to affordability. There is no affordability requirement. The hope is that as you build more housing, that'll help increase the housing supply and lower the cost.
In fact, though, is there any evidence of that? Because what you see going on are expensive units. I don't think there's any evidence of that. Do you actually have evidence that increasing the quantity drops the price?
Yeah, great question, Maggie. These are not going to be deed restricted. There's no price requirement. It's possible that depending on where they're located, they could be quite pricey. But the hope is that we're increasing the supply of housing throughout the entire city. We know that there's a lot of demand and not enough supply. Not enough people can get into the housing market.
But there's also people that have multiple units on multiple houses. You have corporations now that are buying single family houses and renting them. So I feel like this is a little bit like there's this concept we should have first floor retail and no proof for it. And in fact, the evidence is against it. And just that simply building more housing is going to address the affordability issue. And I don't think there's any proof of that.
Well, I think that the situation though is one where we do have a housing crisis and there isn't enough housing supply.
Well, is the crisis that, or is the crisis affordability?
I think it's both. Not enough housing supply, too much demand increases the cost of housing. So and I will say we would be one of the first in the nations to do this, right? This is in that way, we're hoping to be a model for other cities and counties. So you're right, it hasn't been tested necessarily because nobody else really has done this across the country. But there are, a lot of support for this. There is a lot of support for this to
From
increase the housing
developers.
supply.
From developers,
No,
yeah.
I think from the folks who aren't in the housing market.
Well, the thing is, okay, my
community
question though
advocates.
is,
Yeah,
you guys are planners. I've been a planner. Where is the proof that simply increasing housing is going to address affordability? Or maybe you don't care about that.
no, we certainly do care about
But
that,
no, but
and
where's the proof
yeah.
that doing that is actually what's happening? Because what you're seeing here is market rate units, high expensive units being built. So are we really?
And
Yeah,
are we talking about home ownership or rentals?
it could
That's
be
another
both.
thing,
Yeah,
because that's stability in neighborhoods.
Right.
absolutely. And I think it could be both. And I'll just say that some of the costs that are tied to housing include a lot of the infrastructure costs. So building new roads, new water lines, new sewer lines, buying land. But the idea here is that you're building within communities and neighborhoods that don't require a lot of that new infrastructure because you can rely on existing infrastructure. So that's part of the reason why some of this housing is less expensive to develop. And for those reasons, it could also be
Yeah,
either
I don't
rented or
think it's
sold at a lower
actually, I
price.
don't think you can demonstrate that it is less expensive to develop. And of course, we're talking about wrecking existing neighborhoods. Meanwhile, urban sprawl is rampant in the south area of Sacramento and in Rancho Cordova. So it's, it is about, it is pretty much saying you're not going to have a neighborhood like Elmhurst or parts of East Sac, or, you're not going to have single family neighborhoods anymore, really is what this is about.
It is a big transformation. I understand that, and again, this is a draft proposal that we're proposing to have adopted at the end of this year. So if you do have any comments or feedback, we certainly would welcome that. If you
So
have any
is
recommended
to
changes,
go back to, is affordability addressing that specifically in here, or it is this theory that if you build more, it's going to be cheaper? That's what's going on.
it's a concept. There's not an
It's a
affordability
concept.
requirement. Yeah,
Yeah.
not a requirement. Yeah.
No, it's not
What are you gonna
not
do
a
with
requirement. It's a concept that isn't proven. Anyway, go ahead, Rick.
what are you
Sorry.
going to do with all the cars that these places produce that require? It's
Uh,
place is
yeah.
already almost undrivable.
We don't have.
That
There's no park
development up by
there.
Cordy Brothers, it's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I see that throughout the neighborhoods, and I know there's been issues with places like Trader Joe's as well along Folsom Boulevard. The city eliminated parking requirements, so parking isn't required as part of these development projects. If parking is being proposed on a cottage court type of development, we do have some guidelines to try to encourage the parking to be located at the rear rather than taking up the entire pavement at the front of our property line. So trying to create more open space and areas for folks to congregate. But parking is no longer a requirement in the city of Sacramento.
So people will park on the streets.
I'm sure that in many cases that will be the situation. Yeah.
I
That's
think
what
you
they're
have a
doing.
lot of hope, but there's not a lot, don't seem to be incentives for taking into account existing neighborhoods.
Do you want to say more about that, Wendy?
Well, you hope that people will build big houses and that big, more dense lots, but there's no guidelines for making it fit into the neighborhood or for addressing the fact that people will park on the streets. People are still driving cars unless you give them really good incentives for public transportation, which
Yeah.
Americans take. But
Yeah, no, I think that's really good input and good feedback, the kind of feedback that we certainly would welcome at either planning commission, city council when we come forward with the proposals. And then we will also share this feedback in our
Thank
staff
you.
report as well. So we're happy to include the feedback that we're hearing today and other feedback that we received in the survey. So it's part of the reason why we're doing the outreach is to hear from the community and report back to council on what are some of the concerns that we're hearing from folks. So I'm hearing today that part of the concerns about parking, congestion, that affordability maybe wouldn't be addressed, are some of the
Trees.
concerns, trees as well. as well
And I
as
wanted to let people know that besides taking those little surveys that are like boards, they also have an email address where if you have a more comprehensive comment, say on neighborhood commercial or missing middle housing, you can write that up and send it to that email address, and that will be considered as part of the survey.
yeah, absolutely. These are all
Especially
very
because
valid
they've
concerns.
parted it out already. So, if you have it, say what the comments are about, I am planning to send some stuff for sure.
Wonderful. The more the better. Yeah, the more feedback we can get, the better. Thank you.
Yeah, do other people have comments? Because maybe it's 7:15, we might want to kind of move towards wrapping this up. I don't know. Did any people other on the neighborhood members want to comment?
And they haven't gotten through everything yet, so we might want to at least
Well,
let
we're
them
not,
work.
I don't think we're going to get through everything now.
Okay.
I mean, is there other things that are I think
No, I think we've gotten through the two major things, right? The three major things where we talked about the rezone, we talked about neighborhood commercial, and we talked about missing middle housing. Those are the three major changes that I think would impact Elmhurst the most. So I think you guys have gotten really the key hard hitters. Would definitely love to have your feedback through email, through the comments, in person, live, all of it, right? So yeah, this has been immensely helpful. We really thank you for your honesty and your candid comments and thoughts and thoughtfulness into this. Yeah, and we'll be sure to share this out.
And I guess my one comment about trees, am I not muted? Okay, good. And it's simply simple. When I look at the general plan, I look at part two, the stuff about urban heat islands, the part about mobility, and the part that's the implementation that says all this has to be included in looking at development. So I see it as very simply that our tree canopy and our housing are co-equal goals for environmental, to get cars off the road and to stop urban sprawl. But the trees are essential infrastructure. And I see the balance going towards housing and not our tree canopy. And when I see the planet getting warm, we have our canopy goals, and we're already almost, we're more than halfway to 2030, and we're nowhere near that goal. I mean, I just see that's kind of getting pushed aside to build housing, just simply.
Yeah,
It's a
good.
very real concern of ours too. Yeah.
Can
Because
you tell me how much missing housing we have in Sacramento?
We were about
And how
to
much
do,
is coming on board right now because there's a lot of building?
yeah, that's a really good question. I don't have the numbers offhand.
I think I can give a back of the napkin number. Last year we had something like 2,500 units in the city of Sacramento that were constructed. And of those, we had something like 30 projects. Majority were duplexes that were considered missing middle housing that were constructed. So not a lot. I would say that it was a very small fraction of development that occurred in the city. We are loosening the regulations a bit, removing the bulk tent standards and allowing the third floor and the fourth floor now. So we think that it's going to incentivize more development of missing middle housing. But for the most part,
Excuse me,
majority
when you
development
say
occurred.
missing middle housing, is that a certain segment of the missing housing? Because I see a lot of housing happening. Apartments, is that not counted in missing middle housing?
Correct. That's not
Well,
counting. Yeah.
then can you tell me how much housing we are missing from people? Minus the missing middle, how I want people housed. How much housing are we missing in Sacramento?
The housing element that we have in the city of Sacramento identifies a regional housing needs allocation number. And that number is something like 40,000 units within the city of Sacramento over
that's
like the
based
next
on
10
projections,
years.
so that's
Based
not
on
like,
projections, yeah.
yeah,
But
it's not,
that were developed by economists and the state and Sacramento Area Council governments and the city working together. So they are tied to the California economy and growth projections here at the city as well.
So it's not about housing the homeless, if you're asking about that, because this
No,
is
I
not,
wasn't
has
actually
Oh, correct.
nothing to
That's a
do.
specifically.
separate plan. Yeah, that's
No,
separate.
no,
That's
I
separate.
wasn't
You know,
No, no.
specifically asking it.
okay.
I'm just seeing a lot of housing being built, and I'm hoping people are getting into that housing.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
just want
yeah.
to differentiate
Yeah, it's
between what we're talking about, missing middle,
yeah.
and housing in general, and
Okay.
how much housing we're missing of people who want to be, who have the means to be housed,
I see. I see.
who might want to buy a home
Yeah,
and
yeah.
live in a neighborhood to, what are we, so
Yeah,
what are we
Patricia,
missing?
I will say, we're very fortunate in the city of Sacramento in that housing has been, you're right, you see a lot of housing, it's really exciting. You drive downtown, you go through some of the suburban neighborhood, housing is still being built. What we're talking about here when we say missing middle housing is allowing additional housing within lots that were traditionally zoned for just one unit. So
It
it's
means
Right.
destroying single family neighborhoods
maximizing
and putting
development.
in multiple,
Okay.
multi-story buildings. That's what it is.
I,
You've got
I wouldn't characterize it that way, but I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
Elmhurst is completely built out. There might be one vacant lot. So you're basically talking about going in there, tearing down the housing that's already there and putting up large apartments. That's what this is.
I say you could
Absolutely.
add in the backyard, you could build up. So existing housing does not have to be torn down.
Well, if you're going to do 4 stories, it does. Anyway,
Yeah,
anybody else
my
have
house is not
comments?
going to take another three
Good.
stories on top, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Anybody else? Sharon, did you have comments, or Gordy, did you have questions or comments?
Well, I have one comment. I would hope that this sort of push for so-called missing middle housing is being extended across the city. I mean, I can't imagine anybody in East Sacramento going for a 4-story monolithic block such as you had in those illustrations. Where would they put such a thing?
Yeah,
On
that's a good point. So I'll say there are 100,000 lots that are zoned what traditionally what was R1 or single family home, and so all of these lots are being zoned for missing middle housing. So this is not just Elmhurst, but it's East Sac, Tahoe Park, South Natomas, North Natomas, North Sacramento, South Sacramento. The vast majority of the city where you traditionally just had one single unit that could be developed will now allow 4-story apartments or three story to 4-story apartments. So it's a big change that's being proposed, but we certainly do welcome your input as
And
this
I do,
is
on
being
that note,
finalized.
I
Yeah,
do hope that you take note of Allison's comment in the chat.
yeah, it's a great
We
note.
have
Yeah,
other impacts in this neighborhood, which is the hospital and Aggie Square. So we do take in quite a bit. And, I mean, all of us have maybe different, the hospital is the hospital, but yeah, so we have impacts already in this neighborhood.
yeah. I think Allison's comment
And
is really good, and I would say
yes.
to Allison just that I don't think it sounds privileged. I think it's fair to say some folks invest in their neighborhood and with the expectation that they know what they're investing in, they know what it's going to look like, and maybe didn't anticipate this change. And so I can understand that that's a lot to take in. So I mean, it's a
Kind of a
valid point and
rug pull.
perspective. But it's a
Radical.
valid perspective, and we're welcoming all these perspectives, but and feedback. So certainly,
I have to
it's good
say, the
comments.
other
Yeah.
thing, when you say that we be the first to do this, I
Yeah.
don't find that comforting.
Yeah.
No, I don't either.
But not to say seriously, I appreciate the work that you do and I mean, I'm not trying to diss any of the work in your profession that you do. And thank you for listening to us. But yeah, these are I don't know where you live, and I'm not going to ask you. We all make our choices.
Yeah, the other thing with
Yeah.
this is it's gonna actually wreck the fabric of neighborhoods, because you have neighborhoods where people know their neighbors. You pack in more people, you do multi-story building, you don't have that same phenomena. And I would just say, I mean, again, I've been a city planner and a county planner. I mean, a lot of this is based on untested theory, and it doesn't look at all the consequences. There's not a life cycle analysis here. I mean, there's an issue of water in Sacramento too. What are you gonna do with packing 40,000 more people in here, right? I guess you won't let them have lawns, but I mean, there's a lot more complicated issues. And it's not you guys, it's really the short-sighted city council and developers that are pushing this, and the cost of it is, you're not going to have these neighborhoods that are, where there is coherency, where neighbors know each other, and anyway, but
One little question I have, and maybe you guys can
yeah.
think about it, because Opticoats is the one that coined missing middle housing, and I've heard them talk a lot, even before the city, when they had focus groups. And the thing is, have they worked in cities with the heat issues of Sacramento? I know some of them are in Portland and the Bay Area, and they'll talk about different cities, but heat is the #1 killer. So, I mean, you've got that all in the general plan. There's a whole thing on urban heat, and Rachel can tell you the whole thing. So,
Yeah.
so I
No,
just
for
wanted to
Jessica,
say, has
we
Opticos
yeah.
actually done this in cities like this?
Well, I'll tell you that we have worked with Opticos and with Rachel or sustainability staff and tree staff who work on the urban forest plan to ensure that one of the requirements is that in the front setback, the rear setback, the side setback, there's requirements for planting trees. And we will also be keeping all of the protections that we have in the city code for protection of heritage trees, trees that have a certain width and diameter, to make sure that those are staying in place. Trees are of utmost importance to us here in the city of Sacramento. We recognize just how difficult it is for folks that are suffering from extreme heat, and for the general population. So we want more trees. So that is a part of our thinking process that we've developed this ordinance. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
and you can't have that if you cover entire lots and you build multi-story buildings. So
yeah, the example that you can look at even just here is the north and the south, where they don't have the strips for planting trees. I mean, KCRA just did a thing and Rachel was on it, and they went and they did the heat like in somewhere like Land Park, and then they did the heat in the south area somewhere, and it was like, but if you have more hardscape, that's going to be everywhere. So really it needs to be looked at very seriously. And I would say it needs to be in the code so that when somebody plans a development, they're put on notice that the trees are important,
Yeah.
and that the planners are going to be looking at that when they look at the plan. Because I think it comes, we can have all these theories, but it comes to a project by project basis.
We agree. We are codifying the requirement to plant trees. So, and allowing the space for that. So that is a part of it as well.
Thank you, Remy.
Yeah.
And
Any
trees
last
take time to
questions?
grow.
Go ahead. What? Yes, they need time to
And
grow.
trees
Absolutely.
take time to grow, and they
Yeah.
need water.
Only
Anyway.
because you mentioned my name.
Okay, Sharon, go for it.
I came from Los Angeles, right by USC, and Caruso, insisted that he was going to make this wonderful shopping center. Yes, there's a Trader Joe's there, but oh my gosh, there was the small people that we used to go, for shoe shines and all. They had no opportunity at all for, and that's another thing. But even when they developed that plan, it's and it's right by USC, Hoover, Jefferson. When they developed that property, they didn't even make the okay, so we must need to have maybe water. We may need to have, so there was no effort to make those properties succeed. Caruso is rich beyond measure, but he has no anyway, Caruso. Anyway, that's the thing. I'm just saying that I think developers don't comprehend what it means to neighborhoods. And so, yeah, I'm just saying you need to, focus in, make some, just presume that because they have big names, they have lots of money, they are not in it for our neighborhoods. Okay.
Thank you. Well, with that, it's 7:30. I think we're gonna wrap this up, and I think that's gonna kind of be the meeting for tonight, unless anybody has questions about outstanding issues. We do have upcoming events. The happy hour will be next the 20th.
Yes.